Alright, so today I'm going to be showing you guys how I recreated this Johnny Blaze inspired fire effect in After Effects, and yeah, let's just get straight into it. So first you're going to duplicate your main layer and you're going to rename it Roto just so we can stay organized. From there, double click into that footage over there, find a place where you find the full body in frame, and just start painting out your subject. Take your time with this and make sure that you get a clean rotoscope over the subject, and I'll have the footage provided in a link down below so that you guys can try this out yourself too. After the rotoscope is done, I want you guys to add a key cleaner effect to it, and then we're just going to pre-compose that rotoscope layer to make it its own footage. Now on your rotoscope layer, add a tint, and this is what's going to turn it black and white so we have the base for the effect. And then we're going to add another tint effect to it, and this is where the magic actually happens. So we're going to change the map black to white instead, like we're inverting it, and then the map white, we're going to change it to an orange color because that's going to be something around what the color of the fire is going to look like when we're trying to make this effect take place. Then I'm going to get you guys to add a curves effect, and we're going to drop the midtones down a bunch so we get some more contrast in the scene, and drop the highlights a tad bit. And remember, this is log footage, so it might vary depending on what you're working with, but the idea is still the same. Because I'm working with log footage, I added an adjustment layer, put a levels effect on top of it, and I just crushed the blacks and the whites back to the perfect exposure to make sure that what I'm working with actually is representative of what it's supposed to look like. And you could toggle this on and off just in case you're working with log footage like I am. So now I duplicated that roto layer and then I renamed it to fire body comp, and this is because we're going to be using this as a matte to extract the highlights from the footage so we can create that initial glow that you seen at the beginning of the clip to ignite the fire. Then we're going to add an extract effect to that layer, and we're going to pull back our blacks and our whites, which is the highlights inside of the scene, so that we can extract the luminance values in between to create that effect that you seen at the beginning where his arm starts lighting up. This is just a neat little trick that I use, and it can be applied on other things, but for this one specifically, I want you guys to focus on trying to get this right depending on your footage. Now when you add a glow effect to that layer, you're going to be able to see that it actually only shows up where the highlights are, and this is what you want so that we can create that initial ignition. And you can change the colors and stuff to match using curves or maybe the color effect inside of whatever it is that you're using, but we're going to be using keyframes so that we can gradually make this appear before the effect actually takes place. Now before you even start putting in assets, the first thing I did, and you can use the native tracker, but I like Mocha, but I used Mocha to track the hands and parts of the body so that I can make sure that the assets are following and tracking in the scene properly, and depending at what part of the body that they're placed so that it actually moves accordingly with that. So just keep that in mind, create a couple of nulls and then paste that data where necessary so that you guys can have a solid track in the scene. This is pretty basic stuff, so I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I'm sure you guys are understanding the concept of what I'm saying. And this is the fun part where you get to put all the assets where you want them to be, changing the rotation, the scale, the position, staggering, the timing, and make sure to attach them to the relevant nulls that you need depending on where they're placed on the body. And from there, remember to place layers behind the rotoscope and stuff too to add some depth to it, and this is what's going to give more of that burning image. Remember, we're going to make it look pretty later, so right now it doesn't matter, just put things where they need to be. Now when you got everything where you want it to be, I want you to duplicate the actual rotoscope and then select all of the assets that you placed along with the tracks and pre-comp this all together. Now when you go inside of this, I want you to add a black fill effect on the rotoscope layer, and this is what's going to turn it black. So when you place a glow, it's going to create a light wrap around your subject when you're in your main comp now, and change that to screen blending mode or add, just figure out what works best for your scene. Now on that fire comp, add a tint effect so that we can neutralize all of the colors to bring it back to just one color space. Trust me, this is really important. Then we're going to add a color vibrance effect, and we're going to change that color to match something that's similar to fire. Make sure your color vibrance effect is at the top, and we chose like an orangish kind of color to match kind of more of what the background looks like with the person glowing, so that we can make the effect sell a lot better inside of the scene. And then of course you can use an optical glow, a deep glow, or the native glow, and just tweak the settings until you find something that really works for what you're trying to do inside of this scene. And here's a fun little trick. If you take that light matte we made earlier with the extractor effect and you play with the settings, it'll add more of an aura of a glow around the rotoscope, and I think this is what helps really ground that effect, especially with the heat and the light that would emit from it. So do that if you want to add a little more. After that, I add an adjustment layer and use Video Copilot's heat distortion effect and played around with the values until we found something that we really liked that emulated what the heat coming off of the Johnny Blaze effect would look like. You could play around with this depending on you're seeing how close or how far you are away from it, but it just works depending on what you're doing, but the concept, like I said, is still the same. After that, we added another adjustment layer using the CC vector blur effect, and then used the fire comp as the displacement map so we can add some more distortion to all of the flames around. Be very subtle with this because you don't need to do a lot, but this is what also adds like that heat signature coming off that creates that distortion you'd see more naturally with fire if it was emitting. From here, I was actually going back in and out of the pre-comp with the fire and adding different energy assets from Film Riot's pack, things that kind of look like fire or something was emitting, and that was just accents to add more depth to the scene, and attaching those to the tracks that we actually had there initially. I think this is a great way to add some extra pieces to it that otherwise you wouldn't think were there, but adding the embers, the wisp of energy, the energy leaks and stuff like that, especially during the ignition initially, is what adds the complexity and the layers that kind of bring this whole image together. So don't be shy and take your time putting things in different places and testing it out to see what works for your scene. Now, going back to that clip initially that we put the extractor effect on, this is where the magic takes in, and we added a couple of keyframes before his hand came up with one of the energy bursts, trying to time it accordingly so that we can make it look like the energy was actually charging up before he transforms and turns into the Johnny Blaze effect that you see here. And this is pretty cool. Just play around with it until you find the timing perfectly, and in the final pre-comp is where we tie it together with the shake, the flash and stuff, and that's what I'm going to show you after. So as long as you get the concept of this pretty accurate in this part right here, play around with it until you find something that works, but don't worry too much. We'll make it look pretty after this. So now we're going to pre-comp everything together to get into our final comp to make it look pretty. From there, when we get in that spot, we're going to add an adjustment layer and chop it into two pieces, only a few frames long, and then duplicate that second piece up top so we can add the effects. We're going to start with a radial blur. First, we're going to start with a radial blur, and we're going to change it from spin to zoom, and we're going to keyframe the amount for a few frames until the ignition begins. And right here is where you're just going to play around with it a bit, but we just increased the intensity until we reached about where the light rays are, and this is where the second part actually pulls it together. So adding the CC light burst to it, we're going to change the intensity and the ray length, and we're going to have that happen for only a few frames, and this is what's going to make it look like the energy actually flashes and powers up before all of the fire effects start coming into place. And the final thing that really brings it together is a shake, and we use Production Crate's shake script. This thing is amazing. Go to Jolt 3, and then we just hit the shake button on the main layer, and as the light burst happens before the radial blur takes place, this just ties it all together, and that subtle shake actually makes it look like the transformation takes place. And from here, realistically, it was just tweaking different things inside of the pre-comp with the fire, retiming certain assets, and making sure that initial energy burst that came up actually was initiating at the point that we wanted the light burst, the radial blur, and the shake to take place. And take your time with this because this just requires finessing certain parts to make it come together. But all in all, this is a pretty simple effect, and I didn't use a lot to make it happen, but it's paying attention to the finer details to make something like this come together that's important for you to make this actually happen. And as always, you guys, I appreciate you being here for the tutorial. I'm glad this can help you guys. I got so many requests from people asking me to make a tutorial for this. If you guys enjoyed it, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. And get out there and create. I don't care what you have. There's no bad cameras. There's only people that don't know how to use them. And if you want to know how to use them, make mistakes, get out there and learn. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace for now.